Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Advanced Placement Equity Self-Assessment webinar. I am Dr. Carolina Buitrago. I am the Director of Impact and Learning at Mass Insight Education and Research. And today I am joined by Kimberly Izquierdo. She is the counselor, the school counselor, AP coordinator, and NHS advisor at Holyoke High School in Massachusetts. And by Hugh Halligan, he is the principal at Norwood High School in Massachusetts as well. Welcome, everyone. Let's start with our learning objectives for this session. At the end of this session, what we want to be true for all of you joining us today is to become familiar with the purpose and the components of our AP Equity Self-Assessment. We also would like to enhance your understanding of how to access the AP Equity Self-Assessment online and how to navigate it so that you are able to complete it. And finally, to understand the value of the AP Equity Self-Assessment findings as the basis for strategic planning and improvement implementation in your school or in your district. We're going to start with an overview of what this tool is about. First of all, the AP Equity Self-Assessment is one of 3 tools that Mass Insight has designed to increase access and participation in advanced placement coursework. The AP Equity Self-Assessment is focused primarily on the structural aspects of the AP program. And additionally, we have developed the classroom strategies for AP success and the AP on-track framework. These are more instructional in nature. And we will have a webinar next week on Tuesday at 3:30 in the afternoon, where we are going to have an opportunity to do a deep dive on these 2 additional tools. But today, our focus is the AP Equity Self-Assessment. What is the AP Equity Self-Assessment? It is an online survey that you can access in our website. And it is an instrument that assesses the extent to which you have best practices in place to support equitable access and equitable success in AP for all of your students. More specifically, this tool assesses whether and the extent to which best practices are in place around 5 specific dimensions. Focus on 5 specific dimensions. People, whether the management of your staff is conducive to equity in AP. Time and scheduling, whether that structural condition of timing and scheduling serves a purpose for increasing access and success in AP. Money and budgetary issues and aspects of your program, whether you have best practices in place. Programmatically, your program structure, specifically your instruction, your supports to families, whether they are in place. And lastly, policy, whether the extent to which the policies that you have in place are conducive to equity. For each of these structural conditions, the users will respond survey items using a Likert scale. I will show you in a couple of minutes more specifically how this looks like online. At the end, once you have completed this online survey, the platform in which this tool is built actually generates a customized and automized findings report that identifies specific areas of strength, areas of opportunity, and areas to keep an eye on. And these findings very often serve as the basis for developing specific action plans for your school and your district. We have done this with several of our partner schools and districts to great success. More specifically, the AP Equity Self-Assessment assesses 28 best practices overall with a total of 69 survey questions. That means that you need to allocate about 90 to 120 minutes to complete this survey. And we highly recommend, strongly recommend that you complete this self-assessment with a diverse group of stakeholders. So this is not an individual self-assessment. It is meant to be completed by a team of stakeholders that have some decision-making power or some participation in the AP life of your school. For example, when we have done this with partner schools, we have brought together AP teachers, sometimes non-AP teachers as well, counselors, AP coordinators, and building administrators to complete it together as a team. And we also recommend that you have some data readily available because some of the questions are going to require for you to have some information handy that you might not recall without having the data next to you. Let me show you more specifically how to find this tool on our website and how to navigate it. So once you go to our website, you will look for the AP Success Tools as shown in here, and that will lead you to our landing page. Once in the landing page, you will click on Start the Self-Assessment, which will lead you specifically to information about the self-assessment. Once you find that page, you will see a downloadable PDF guide to the self-assessment, which contains the whole set of questions that you will find in the online survey. This is helpful in preparing your team for the completion of the questionnaire in case you want to have access to the questions beforehand, before you get together to complete it. And as I mentioned earlier, there are specific recommendations about time, team, and data that you need to allocate in order to complete the self-assessment. At the bottom of that page, you are going to find a series of specific next steps, and you will find the assessment click that will lead you to the actual online survey. Once you land on the online survey, you will find a contact information form that you need to complete first with your name, last name, email address, role, district, school, state, and the NCES school ID. This is the National Center for Education Statistics ID. That is just an ID that is given by the federal government to each school and district in the nation. And we ask for it just in case we conduct research with these findings from your self-assessment so that we can de-identify the data and anonymize it. The way to find the NCES code is by scrolling up on that page and click where it says find it here. Once you click there, it will show you this form that you complete. And after you complete the basic information asked for there, you click search and you will be given your NCES district ID and school ID. Then you can start completing the self-assessment. Once you start completing it, once you click complete, you will be sent an email that will only take a couple of minutes. And in that email, you will get a unique link for your school or district. That is the link for your school or district self-assessment. It's unique to your context. Once you click on your unique link, you will see the pre-filled contact information form, and then you can get started in your self-assessment. You will look at the instructions and you can save and exit as many times as you need to. And you will start completing it, going through each question. For each question, the Likert scale goes from strongly agreed to disagreed to strongly agree. And you can use the sliding scale to indicate your answer and move to the next section. Once you complete all of the sections in the survey, remember it assesses 5 structural conditions, you will be given a link in your inbox again with your customized report. So once you click complete at the end of the self-assessment, you will get an email. And in that email, you would get a link which will allow you to download your findings report from your AP Equity Self-Assessment. That report, we will dissect it a little in a bit more detail in a couple of minutes, but then it really comprises all the specific recommendations, the identified areas of strength, and some areas to keep an eye on as you improve your AP program. So let's dig a little deeper in terms of the components for each of these structural conditions that the AP Equity Self-Assessment gauges. So as I said earlier, this self-assessment assesses best practices around policy, program, people, time, and money, all specific to your AP program. So let's start with the structural condition of money or budget. And at this point, I want you to think about what would be one thing related to the budget in your school or district that your district or school can do to promote equity in AP. As you think about that, let me walk you through the specific best practices that this self-assessment tool assesses whether you have them in place. So the first one is whether your school or district is securing financial resources that are specific to AP and specifically targeted to increasing access and success in AP. Another one is whether your school or district is compensating teachers for the additional time that they're giving their students to support them academically in order to succeed in AP. And whether your school or district is providing exam fee subsidies for students who need them. Now, when we think about the structural condition of people or staff, let's consider one thing related to the management of staff that your school or district can do to promote equity in AP. The AP Equity Self-Assessment will identify the extent to which you do the following: whether the school or district hires and places high-quality teaching staff in the AP classrooms, whether there is a practice of collective responsibility where the entire building feels responsible for the success of AP students and not just the AP teachers, whether there is a sense that this is a collective goal for all of the adults in the school to have the AP students succeed. Whether your district or school ensures that AP families are aware and understand what AP classes are about, what the expectations are, what the benefits are, and what kinds of supports families can provide in their homes for the students. And lastly, it assesses the extent to which your school or your district is actually targeting supports specifically to the counselors who are guiding the students and encouraging the students and supporting the students as they consider the idea of enrolling in AP and as they enroll in AP and fulfill the course requirements during the year. Now let's move to the structural condition of policy. Once again, I would invite you to consider what is one thing related to AP policies that your school or district can do to promote equity in AP. The AP Equity Self-Assessment gauges whether your school or district has an AP open enrollment policy, for example, and whether there are supportive add and drop policies around AP. Now, in terms of the structural condition of time, once again, let's think about one thing related to the management of time that your school or district can do to promote equity in AP. Think about master schedule, for example. So our tool assesses the extent to which your school or district secures time for teacher planning and collaboration. And this is specific of AP teachers. Do they have a chance in their schedules to get together and share best practices, share challenges and ideas on how to address them? It also gauges whether the master schedules are maximizing the opportunities to access AP for students, for all students in the school. These are sample practices that around this structural condition of time, the AP equity self-assessment gauges. In terms of the structural condition of program, this is really about the specific program structure of AP. So what would be one thing related to the AP program itself that your school or district can do to promote equity in AP? This is one of our longest sections in our online survey. And this section assesses things like the following: whether your school or district ensures proper course sequencing, whether your school or district ensures AP instruction, that the AP instruction happening in AP classroom is culturally responsive, whether there are opportunities that are specific to AP teachers to increase the quality of their teaching, whether the summer assignments are something that are, it's a policy and are specific assignments that are being refined or limited so that they don't become a barrier to access AP. And whether your school or district is using AP potential scores for equity to identify students who have potential for AP before they consider enrolling in AP classes. There are many more practices under the program section of the tool that get assessed, but these are just a few examples of what it gauges. Once users complete the self-assessment, as I mentioned earlier, the platform yields an automized and customized report specific to your context. This is the typical cover page of the report that you get in an email after you complete your online survey. This report has 2 scores, one overall AP equity score, the scores go from 1 to 5, and a score for each structural condition assessed. The report also offers qualitative findings, and these findings are about areas of strength for the areas that yielded high scores, recommendations for areas in which the scores were low, and areas to keep an eye on, which are the more average items where the scores were in the average scale. And this is how the report looks like. So it has a page where it provides the overall score. And for each structural condition, there is the specific score, the areas of strength, the recommendations, and the areas to keep an eye on. This self-assessment report is something that we have supported many partners around the country in completing. And once the findings are specified in the report, we have supported partners in developing strategic and action plans based on those findings to address the areas of opportunity and recommendations, and to start testing some improvement ideas for increasing AP equity in their schools and districts. So as I mentioned, we have 2 wonderful guest speakers today who actually will illustrate how they went about developing an action plan based on the findings from their AP equity self-assessment. So I'm going to pass it over to Kim Izquierdo, who is going to walk us through how they did that at Holyoke High School here in Massachusetts.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Kimberly Izquierdo. I'm one of the school counselors here at Holyoke High School, and I'm also the AP coordinator. Myself and Anna Regali, our college and career counselor, completed the survey last year around this time. It took about 2 to 3 sessions for us to work on the survey. It took about 30 minutes each time, I would say. And we consulted with our principal as well as our district data leader There were certain questions that we saw in the sneak peek guide beforehand that we knew that there were some things that we needed to get their input on. So that was very helpful to see the questions beforehand. So we got our results back, and it was really very informative, the results that we got back. And it showed that we had a score of a 3.26, which indicated that we had some structural conditions in place for equality and equity within our AP program. However, there was opportunities for improvement. So we met with the Mass Insight team, and they were very helpful in helping us determine some key areas for to prioritize. The first finding was getting our AP information out more completely and effectively, so that 100% of parents and caregivers are given the opportunity to know everything they need to know about our AP opportunities at Holyoke High School. So we began working more closely with our early college program here at our school, promoting AP activities as well as early college activities, and making sure that families knew that it didn't have to be one or the other, that students can participate in early college as well as AP, and finding the best courses for their students. We also actively put all of our AP information on our district website as well as the early college website. And we created a one-pager of information with all of our AP data so that we could have it at events for families. The second finding that we looked at was AP teacher learning. So with the help of one of our vice principals, we have created an AP learning team, or a PLC. So this group meets now a couple times, about 3 to 4 times a year, and look at lesson planning. And it's great to see the teachers work together, and there's definitely a feeling of community now amongst the AP teachers. The third finding that we found was eliminating barriers. And one of those at our school was summer work. So we looked at this policy because in the past, Holyoke High School has always required summer work for our AP classes. So starting this summer, we strongly discourage teachers from assigning summer work because it created a barrier for students. When they came back, if they didn't complete the work, they were already behind. So doing this dramatically decreased the number of students who wanted to drop their AP class at the beginning of the school year. Another area that we are working on in this is actively using AP potential. So focusing on these 3 priorities has made a big difference in how our AP program operates more equitably at Holyoke High School.
Thanks so much, Kim. Now I'm going to pass it over to Hugh Galligan, who is going to walk us through how this work was done at Norwood High School.
Thanks, Carolina. Everybody can hear me okay? Yeah, just give me a thumbs up. Yeah. All right. As she said, I am Hugh Galligan. I'm the principal at Norwood High School. Happy to talk a little bit about our process with our AP leadership team, our self-assessment, self-equity assessment, and the process we went through. We set up an AP leadership team early last year. On that team, it included 2 administrators, myself, our associate principal, our school counseling director for the high school, our AP coordinator, and our assistant superintendent for certain targeted meetings. For our AP equity tool, we set up a totally separate long meeting where we could try to isolate and chunk out a long piece of time to do it all the way through. It took us approximately 90 minutes or so, I would say, to do the full assessment from start to finish. We felt that worked for us, to be able to block out that time and see it all the way through. Although I will say that prior to it, we took some time to look at it individually and get some feedback from department chairs, students, and teachers, so we could have multiple perspectives represented when we thought about the ratings that we were giving ourselves. We wanted to make sure we had people who represented various perspectives, so that we could understand how it was perceived by teachers, students, families, each stakeholder. When we did the self-assessment, we had data readily available. So I would recommend, some pre-work where you have this data available on site with you, even hard copies. Like for us, that worked. We had data related to our budget, to our course enrollment. We had our course selection procedures, which varied previously from department to department. And we had AP scores from a couple years leading up to that year, as well as prior AP potential reports. And I bring that up because prior to that, we had not paid much attention at all to AP potential. And that is an area that we used to leverage how we're going to get at this. After we got our results from the self-assessment, that happens really quick, by the way, you get it back very quickly. We decided to really hone in on the area of programming. We already had investigated some significant financial resources into our AP programs over the last few years. We had made sure that our AP exams were covered in the operating budget for all students to ensure financial equity and access. We had increased PD for staff, but we had identified these kind of barriers that existed in this, that showed through in the self-assessment in the areas of programs, specifically in identification, recruitment, and enrollment of traditionally marginalized student populations. So, once we did that, it kind of confirmed what we already knew and helped us pursue our goal in making sure that our AP sections are demographically representative of our entire school. So we started there. We decided that taking kind of a structural approach to it first made sense for us. And so I would recommend that you think about, like, do you want to look at something structural that you can work on to shift at first, or do you want to look at something that's like practice related in terms of teaching practices, teaching and learning? And we really got at the structural piece first. We thought it made sense for us. So as I said, we focused on identification, recruitment, enrollment. We quickly identified a barrier and realized that we had varying strategies and approaches from department to department through the course selection process. Our AP enrollment was tied very strongly to teacher recommendation from your previous course, which I think is fairly common in high schools. But that was really heavily reliant on past successes in areas that may or may not directly relate to a student's future performance or their interest in a certain AP course. So we tried to leverage AP potential reports, and we really got into that. We did a deep analysis of our AP potential report as soon as it came out. We do the PSATs with all our 10th and 11th graders. So we dug right into that, and we worked with Mass Insight to do that. We first created a letter, kind of congratulatory, celebratory letter that we delivered to all students in school and sent home to all families in their target language and in their home language, to all students and families who had met AP potential. And we just kind of checked off the areas that they did. It explained a little bit about what an AP course was, but mostly it said, like, congratulations, this is outstanding. And we want you to talk to your current science teacher and counselor about what this means. So we really wanted to try to, like, get at that, that first level of conversation that was needed, because we realized that was not happening previously in the course selection process. Once we did that, we had targeted meetings with school counselors for students from traditionally marginalized populations identified on our AP potential. Then counselors followed up with those families as well to be like, hey, we had a meeting, want to make sure you got the letter. We had this meeting, your student has been recognized for AP potential in science. All teachers that had that student in that content area were made aware too, so that when teachers talked with students in that course about which course they were recommending them for next year, they could have that conversation. Students could ask specific questions about, like, hey, if I move on to AP chemistry, what is this like? I've heard this, or I don't know anything about it. Can you tell me what it is? And it was a good opportunity to maybe correct some misinformation that might be out there. And we really thought that, like, rather than overhaul a process that was pretty efficient, because our course selection process was incredibly efficient, we decided to add in components that would make it more effective at reaching our goals. So that's how we approached it. We really isolated those areas of identification, recruitment, and enrollment, and yielded positive results. So this year we're looking to build on that, adding kind of AP information sessions and student visits, kind of a AP ambassador model we're looking at to be able to have kind of more peer-to-peer connection. But we're really excited about that first step we took last year. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Hugh and Kim. These are just great illustrations of how, after completing the self-assessment and after kind of exploring and thinking about the findings, these two schools and, were able to actually translate these findings into very specific actions and very specific improvements. So thanks so much, Kim and Hugh, for joining us today. We just wanted to make everyone aware that the same way we've done work with Holyoke High School and Norwood High School, we actually do partner with a great number of schools and districts in doing this kind of work. And as Hugh mentioned, we actually kind of ask potential partners to choose their entry point into the support that they would like to prioritize for a given year or a given term. So we offer that either we can get into the structural aspects of the AP program or the instructional aspects of the AP program. And for each of these tracks, we have specific supports and specific tools that can help you design and test some improvements, or you can work on both in parallel. And so we highly encourage you to actually take advantage of a special opportunity we have right now for you to engage with us, which is actually a pro bono 1-hour consultation opportunity that we are opening up to anyone interested in exploring these tools further or any other kind of work that you want to focus on in terms of AP equity or any specific improvement at large that you are considering in addressing a specific problem of practice that you might be encountering this particular year. And we also want to invite you to our next webinar, which is going to focus more on the instructional supports that we have for AP and to advance AP equity. That is going to be focused specifically on the AP on-track framework that we have developed with that purpose and our classroom strategies for AP success. I would like to open it up for questions. If anyone has any question, this would be a great time to bring them up. We'll be happy to go over any question that you might have. All right. You can always reach us at partner@massinsight.org with any question or any interest in taking advantage of our consultation hour pro bono. And we thank you for attending today, for joining us today, and for sharing the excitement of the AP Success Tools. And we hope to see you next week on the webinar that will focus on our AP on-track framework. Thank you so much.